I would hope we have vacation time. We're not in the nonprofit world. This is what we can usually offer. We can offer vacation.
Oh, I didn't bring it with me. I have, well, I accrue PTO.
Yep, like that's what I do too.
Yeah.
We're on accrual, which adds up really quickly.
It does. Yeah, it looked like it would.
Yeah.
Trying to think. I know, like.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Thank you.
You look like those things on Facebook where there's a before and after.
Yeah.
Instagram where they
Yeah.
what do you want? I want it short. Very cool.
Okay, I might not be there. Good morning.
Marilyn and Esther. Marilyn Rosen and Esther Brill. Oh yeah. You know what? Brain farts happen. But like I see.
It happens more and more now.
Yeah.
I think it's also. So yeah, so you should be getting, at least should be getting.
Well, I mean, we get health care here, but
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
I've been waiting all year to hear what you have to say on your account.
I was gonna say, you hear me all the time, so I don't know if that's a.
Anti-Semitism by now.
Right, yeah, that was kind of a hope.
Problem solved.
I looked up.
This guy, okay, good.
And I discovered another meaning, that almost doesn't work.
Sure.
People who are descended from white families, but from the South. Like with no mention of any mixed race or anything. So maybe it's just sort of loose.
He's trying to figure out everything about the Pope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that he didn't have any
Oh.
idea, and one day later, they just look up in the registries and find all these birth records of the Catholic birth registries.
Something similar happened in one of the US and that.
Oh, good, I can, if things aren't going well, I have a solution, I guess. That's true. Oh, okay. Well, if no one comes on Zoom, I'm not using this, but that's unlikely. If no one comes on Zoom, I'm not using the mic, but that's unlikely.
Yeah. He didn't know.
Yeah. And it should show up that they need to, it'll tell me if I have to let them in, I guess. Hopefully.
Right.
We're not used to it. Sure.
I saw him speak in other.
Yeah, so I'm gonna.
So it sounded Italian to me.
There. There.
Yes. Well, you know, like the Cantors were like, so, you know. Yes. I mean, she speaks Russian, Ukrainian, Hebrew, so when we think of that as normal. It's very normal for Ukrainians and Russians. I don't think so.
Hello, how are you? Good morning, good morning.
Just let you know, I have to leave early.
Okay, I won't take it. Thank you.
Jewish materials. When they
The representatives are coming, so,
were in Russia. Rather than.
That's nice to hear.
Like, like we have people English. Here, there.
All of a sudden, they needed, community needed official representation. I said, okay, we'll do it. All that stuff.
So anyway.
I mean, you said. Or music and. Well,
It's gonna get your money. So they say, if you really wanna nail somebody, you gotta get a guy that doesn't have. That's the way they do it. Something's down, heaven knows.
But we could try to do Western message, but I don't believe. And I'm yeah. Yes, like I said, we need to.
Good, how are you? You're all right, I know, yeah, I know, yeah, I know. You won't have to do much at all.
Yeah, I'll just, introduce you
Okay.
and then sit in the corner so I don't contaminate it.
Yeah, allergies or whatever it is, are suck.
No, it is exactly. I started taking antibiotics.
Okay,
Nothing else seems to help. so
I'm sorry.
bring in the good old
Yeah.
penicillin.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's why I'm.
Rochester,
Otherwise,
you're-
they'd be like. kissing you in the-
I know, it's exposure to Rochester, That's what it is. Rochester Spring.
I'm very dangerous.
Yeah, yeah.
You watch out.
Jeremy, hi.
Hi.
Just wanted to say that the three playlists and the music, I was expecting it to be good. It was over.
Very
the
loyal.
top.
Oh,
It was,
Serving the greater community.
Oh, it's
you
wonderful.
get the idea?
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you like, yeah, yeah.
And I want to know when you do something at the Fringe. I'm a big Fringe.
Oh, I am. Protest, Václav Havel. I'll release it. I'm directing a two-person play. Yeah, pro.
Whatever you do.
I'll
I
let you
wanna go
know.
See it.
I'll let you know. I'm also gonna stick it all over Temple. You know, officially, we can't publicize it till the Fringe does their announcement in July.
I'm
but
sure you can't.
You-
what?
You're not allowed to publicly do it until the Fringe in July.
Oh,
But I can tell people, I don't care.
yeah.
And yeah, so I already have the dates booked and everything, so,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, because I'm a big Fringe
Oh,
person.
wonderful, wonderful.
And I didn't know that you did things there.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm there.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Show on the road now.
Yeah. I lucked out. I mean, they say half of directing is casting. I know actors in town. And I knew everyone that I cast and called people up. And amazingly, like, I think maybe one person, I think one part, and I wouldn't even tell you which one part, like, I went to a couple other people first.
Yeah.
But virtually every other part, the person was like, sure, sounds great.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Oh,
yeah.
it was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Ethan just-
That's very nice. Thank you. Oh, I do. Thank you. Cool. Thank you.
The short answer is for all of us. God is not outside of us. All of us.
I've been staring for so long. You weren't coming.
But it's-
All right. What's the matter with?
Boss saying he said we understand.
Not out?
That's why I'm not kissing and hugging in it. You gotta wait. Watch it from the others and
If I close this, I still think it'll show up. I still think I'll see it. I might look to you now and then if I forget to look. I might look to you now and then if I forget to look. Which I inevitably will. I taught like this for a year or so and hated it, to be honest with you. So like we had these like hybrid classes where people, I don't know.
May I introduce you?
Yes.
So I need the mic,
You do
but
need-
then maybe not the same mic that you're using. Because then you'll.
Oh.
I'm just very wary of your.
No, I appreciate
I
that.
don't want to destroy your French career.
Oh, thank you. Oh, what's cool. Oh, wonderful.
Or the one woman show that you got it.
Oh, very nice.
Spiritual.
Oh, cool. That's excellent, excellent.
What are you doing?
Mark.
Oh, cool.
Mark, yeah.
Nice.
Okay, good morning, everyone. See, Joe, I'm staying in distance with people, so. It's really nice to be here. Who would have thought that we'd be one session away from the last well, Bagel year one. Looks like we're only born yesterday. Look at us now. So many things have changed this year. For example, when I started this idea of a bagel, I thought I'll have something to eat every Sunday. Now I'm gluten free. So the bagels don't help me anymore. So maybe next year it'll be like, I don't know what, eggs and sausage. I don't know. We'll see what happens. So it's great to be here. We are honored and happy to have Jeremy here with us. And I'm really looking forward to learn from you today, because I think we're all kind of caught up in this thing that we don't know what's true anymore and what to believe and what are our sources of information. Maybe after your lecture, we'll be even more confused.
Perhaps.
Or less, nonetheless. I'm really happy every time that we have a speaker from our own, and it's so nice that you're not only our treasurer,
Right.
but also someone who, is an expert in
No
the
stuff.
things.
Yeah.
So without further ado, and my frog voice needs a rest, so Jeremy Sarachan.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello. So I'm gonna, it was interesting putting this together because more people, cool. Thank you. Because I was sort of like, so I should tell you a little bit about myself to sort of give this some context. I teach at St. John Fisher. So my full-time gig, if you will, is actually to be a professor. And I teach media studies, film, and theater. Theater is kind of a more recent part. So really my major focus over the last 20 years of teaching has been in film and media studies. And so one of the courses that I've really enjoyed teaching off and on, depending on who else wants to do it, we kind of share, is our Introduction to Media course. And some of this lecture today is not only going to be about the topic as it's listed, but also to talk a little bit about sort of what media studies is. And I think sort of understanding that for people will help them maybe see a path forward in terms of hoping that people become a little bit more media literate. So I guess the one other thing I'll say before I really sort of dig in is that there's stuff I'm going to be saying that, well, actually, I'll give a disclaimer in a second. Let me just go to the next slide. Okay, so I have initial comments and disclaimers. So I should mention that this isn't actually how I typically teach. I'm much more like, here's a bunch of reading. I hope you do it, and we're going to discuss it. That's actually more of my style. But I found for situations like this, I didn't want to give you homework. I thought it was probably a little bit better to just sort of go into my sort of, the way I sort of maybe used to teach a little bit more. So that's the first thing I mentioned here. So the first thing is what I just said is that usually I do more of discussion, and any questions I'm welcome. I'm happy to take questions. There are times when I might say, wait a minute, I'm coming to that, but we'll sort of do my best. I use Israel and Gaza as a starting point to sort of look at some examples. I want to sort of make sure that I'm not sort of putting together the idea that, I'm not saying that anything that is sort of anti-Zionist is necessarily anti-Semitic. That's kind of one of my points in this, is how news covers it. But so this is very complex. I'm actually going to try to do this without being too political, actually, which, besides what I just said, which is hard, but you get kind of good at it, where you can talk about media and what media covers without actually doing the politics. So I'm going to try. We'll see if it works. As I just said, I'm not a historian. So if you say, well, how does this affect something that happened in the 19th century? I know as much as you do, probably. I just want to say, like, that's not my field. I want to point that out. You might figure out some of my political views. That happens with my students too. They're like, we think you, yeah, probably, it happens. And I think that's it. The other thing is, I mentioned in the title, which, to be honest with you, I came up with months ago. Professors come up with titles. They come up with very general titles when asked to do a speech in 6 months or a year. They do that because they don't know where the world's going to be in 6 months or a year. And so we make up a title that we know we can make work when we put this together 2 or 3 days before the actual presentation. That's a little secret, so to see it. So I think I'm actually going to focus primarily on social media. So I'm going to do a little bit of traditional media to begin with, but I think social media is where more interesting things are probably happening, and probably, and I'm guessing what people may not be as knowledgeable about. So that's what I thought. So that's kind of my intro. Anyone else? No. Okay. So good old Walter Cronkite, I thought I'd start with. So one thing you should know is I don't actually like PowerPoints. In fact, I teach a course on public speaking in which I make students do like an entire PowerPoint without like any words. So although there's gonna be some words on this, I don't do the like 10 bullet things. Like I actually find that not great, so I don't do it. So even though I call it traditional media, it's often called, believe it or not, legacy media. So anything that isn't social media is legacy media in the terms of a lot of sort of media studies work. And that would be film and television and radio and everything that we don't think about as sort of a 21st century invention. What I think is sort of a good foundational point to think about bias is that, and people again probably know this, and this is something I don't think I knew until I sort of started being a professor and sort of really start studying this stuff. Certainly didn't know as a kid, is that the idea of sort of objective media is very much a 20th century construct. Is that, back in the 19th century, all these people had like these newspapers all sort of had the biases we think of, oh, these are biases today. Like they had left-wing newspapers and right-wing newspapers in the 19th century and all that sort of thing. And in the 20th century, things changed partly because of the mass media growing to the extent that it did. So if you want to sell something on TV, and TV, coming out in the 40s and then becoming big in the 50s, and you want to reach a very large audience, you need to not offend anyone. And so you need to become as neutral as possible. So a lot of that sort of neutrality is really, a half-century construct that existed. It really wasn't there before that. And so the fact that everyone's like, oh, no, now we're in the 21st century and everything's biased, well, yeah, that's how media is. We just had a little break from it. So I think that's something to sort of think about a little bit. More people. Okay. Okay. You can't read this, I know exactly, but I'm going to sort of decipher it for you, and I have a slightly clearer one. So this company, Ad Fonte Media, is a nonprofit, actually, and they came out with this every year, and they update this all the time. Like they do a new one more than once a year, they do this, where they basically have this chart that is mostly used, honestly, I think, by media professors. I'm not sure if who's seen it before? My case. Okay, so there you go. Okay, what? And that is they look at different media sources in terms of two things. It's sort of like extreme left or extreme right. And they look at it from, how much it might be, and this is, I think, is an interesting distinction. It might be left or, right, but it's still like researched well. You can have that sort of some bias in there, but still be like solid journalism, even though it might be written with a certain slant slightly. And then there's stuff that's just inaccurate. They came up with this chart. And so, Pew Research Center, we're gonna look at some of their research. They're not really a journalism site, but they're put right in the middle. Stars and Stripes, believe it or not, is put right in the middle. Reuters is right near the middle. BBC, which I think is something people might go, really? BBC News is actually considered to be a very moderate, middle of the road source. I watch BBC News a lot in Southern American stuff. Then you can see, and actually I'm going to stand up because it'd be better if I point. So then you can see, and I'll just pick things that people watch. So 60 Minutes is slightly left. Vox, if you've heard online, is slightly more left. Al Jazeera, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more, is left, but it's pretty high up. It's not down here. It's actually considered a fairly moderate, for Middle East newspapers, it's considered fairly moderate and even slightly left for Middle East. It's quality of the journalism. Yeah. So the quality, so you can still have slight slant. So stuff up here, Frontline on PBS is up there, but slightly left, but up there. So to point out, our favorites, let me see. CNN is over here now. CNN's there. Where? MSNBC is down here. Fox News is here. So Fox Business is like the Fox Business, or Fox on the web, which is interesting. Fox reporting on the web is actually higher than Fox News on TV because it's more straight journalism and less just the people yelling at each other kind of thing. So that's one. So you get the idea, and you stuff down here, which, Hannity is here. And I'm trying to think what's one that people know, that these aren't as well known. Pod Save America is way over here, and so forth. I don't know if she's separate from MSNBC. Right. I think she's just both.
Up more into the, towards the middle, go up a little bit more to the left. Right?
CNN on the web is here. So that's what's interesting, is that the web stuff tends to be just more straightforward reporting, so it ends up being slightly higher. Yeah.
All of these businesses, because I know that there's some big corporations or whoever owns multiple of these.
Absolutely. And that's something that's a good question. Yeah. So I wasn't necessarily, that's like a whole nother lecture, and that's great. So I'll answer briefly. I can't even keep up with it. I do a whole lecture about how, Disney owns a bunch of these. And there's not that many media companies. A lot of them own multiple sources. And that's a whole nother thing, which I wasn't going to get to, but it's important, but it's a good thing. Yeah, no.
So the upper envelope of this chart has always made me pretty skeptical of something they're doing methodologically.
Okay.
I've always wondered, it seems like they don't allow for a particularly partisan source to be rated all that accurately. The second you're on a partisan wing, the accuracy starts to drop.
But also the fact that it's this and not a straight across. Yeah.
I've always wondered, is it that if you're partisan, something in the methodology views your work as inaccurate, or is it the other way around, where if you're accurate, something in their methods views you as more nonpartisan. I've never been able to figure this out.
I get that. I mean, I think what there's, to me, the way I've taken it, I'm not sure if it answers the question, is simply that they're saying that if there's any kind of slant at all, even like the way the headlines are written, then that in a sense is a somehow not as good reporting, which is how you get the V. I mean, and I think you could argue that, but I think that's where it comes from, I guess. Yeah.
Where PBS and NPR?
These are good questions, especially what's going on right now. I looked before and I saw it. NPR is, it's here, but it's up here somewhere. I looked before because I thought that would be a question. I saw it too, yeah. So I don't want to spend. I can't find it anymore. It's well. Let me go to the next slide. The next slide might help. So someone else made it a little bit like the most popular. Oh yeah, the most popular ones. Someone kind of said like that's hard to look at. Kind of made this. So I will say that there's different versions of the chart. There's sort of one from more sort of right-wing media that sort of pushes everything one way, so that everything that like the last one said was right-wing is suddenly in the center. And a lot of scholars are like, yeah, I'm not going to use that. But to be honest with you, but you know, and so none of this is perfect. As I said, they keep updating it, but it's sort of a starting point to understand how media is. So this is one that I think is also sort of, so it's left, very very right. NPR is here on this.
Is there a ranking among the?
No, I think it's this is literally alphabetical.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, within each list, it's just an alphabetical list.
Is democracy now on there?
I think they're on the, yeah, they're on the far left. So again, you know, I mean, it's very easy, and believe me, it's very easy to go, oh, that's wrong. Like, sure, you know what I mean? It's just that it's sort of a starting point. And when I use it with students, it's again, it's more like a starting point for, no one uses this for anything that actually, like, no one like, at least until recently, this is where my politics are coming up. It was faster than I thought. You know, no one sat down and said, who should get funding? You know, like, it's just been a thing for people to know, you know, and for sort of as a starting point of classes has been kind of how this has been used. But again, I'm going to go on from here, but this is sort of the bright parts over there, you know, so to get an idea. And the Hills I found fascinating because the Hill has kind of been like here, and then at one point it was here. The Hill, I think, is trying to figure out its voice the last few years, because the Hill is like I think moved more than anything. I also read an article about how Newsweek in its current incarnation, all these magazines, basically their current incarnation is not selling much, in my opinion. But like Time, Newsweek has decided that it's going to be like try to be like the most neutral possible. And that's actually their business plan that they're following. So apparently, according to this chart, they achieved it, which is what they're. So again, and what, the last thing I'll just sort of say before we go to the next thing is that to some extent, you know, you always say like, well, this is the ideal. And, you know, but some people might be like, I don't want that. You know what I mean? That's what's interesting. It's like what people want to read, and that will sort of feed into what we're going to talk about in social media in a bit. So I have like 40 slides. I'm not going to get to them. Until my wife, we said like, you have too many slides. So just a quick thing about sort of theory. I like theory with legacy. I think I'm going to be standing. I don't know why I thought I'd sit. With legacy media is that this is like a basic, really old model of how it works. The big sort of definitions are just sort of on the left are like the idea that it's one way and not multi-channel, which is what social media is. We'll explain that. We already talked about it's all corporate controlled. Like in the end, you got to think about who the owners are. And again, that's like its own 2-hour lecture, which I'm not really doing. So that's the thing. It's accessible in that, you know, anyone can sort of, if anyone has like the devices that everyone has, you can watch TV, you can go buy a newspaper. I would argue that social media, in a sense, is less accessible than people thought it was going to be. And that's why I say none of this is that simple. The idea is that there's basically someone coming up with a message and it goes to a receiver. That's the idea. All this encoder and decoder stuff has to do with the fact that like the person making the message is a journalist who might have biases. And as professional as they are, or they might have corporate control that says, write this way, or don't run this editorial. All that stuff kind of gets in here and sort of gets in here. And so like what you receive isn't necessarily what the original writer intended. And that notion is what this is. And this could be like, letters to the editor, the feedback on old legacy media. So that's sort of the idea. So I could talk about this longer, but the idea is that there's a lot kind of in there. What's funny is noise can be like all this sort of like people's politics and, it also can be literally like 30 years ago, like your cable doesn't work well. And everything, doesn't work and you have to change the channel because you can't get the channel to work. It can mean a lot of things. It can literally be like noise. All right, anyone else? Okay. So what I wanted to point out, and I might do this more quickly than I thought, is I'm actually just going to talk through the thing rather than show it, just in the interest of time. I was going to show. So what I did is I went to each of these yesterday, Fox, MSNBC, CNN, and BBC. And I thought it was just sort of interesting, and I encourage you to do this on your own time, is on a given day, the news each covers is completely different. And you may have noticed that. One of the things that I really encourage students to do is look at different news sources. Don't just look at one, no matter where your politics are. Like, it's interesting to look at all of them. And so you could say, like, well, it's not wrong. I mean, you might say, like, they're all covering the news fine, or not, but that's sort of beside the point. What's interesting is that what they even choose, it's gatekeeping, what they even choose to show is completely different on every one. Like, it's like, can I find one common story? Maybe amongst them, maybe. The Pope maybe was, common. Yeah.
So, I don't remember the names of them exactly, but there's a couple of aggregators out there.
Right.
That on the net.
Right.
That basically say, we're gonna tell you about the different type of news and what they're presenting.
Correct.
For all of these things, so that you can see how they're doing it, and so they're using it as the different ways that it's being presented as a source in itself to help you navigate. Have you looked into those?
I'm not sure if I looked in those per se. I'll tell you what I use. I use Apple News personally. I do use Apple News. But even then, and I like that I get all this different news. I don't have to subscribe to each one. And I know I'm sort of killing journalism by not subscribing to them individually, but whatever. That's somewhat sarcastic. But you can also choose. I mean, if there's a real aggregate where you sit down and go, I'm going to make sure I get news from all these sources, I would say that's great. I would say I don't really sort of live what I preach all the time, because on my own Apple News feed, I've picked these places that I want to read from. And so it's very much, you have to be very deliberate in choosing to follow everything. And that's what I found. And there might be other ones that are sort of more automated. I would then have other worries, but so I don't know. What is there one in particular?
I remember Randy Rainbow is moving as an advertiser now.
Oh, okay.
And a couple of other.
That's a good sign.
Couple of other pieces, and what they do is they list things. They take a topic, and they show you what each of the things say, and they give you their notion, like you are.
Oh, okay.
Of whether this is far right,
right,
or left, and that, so that you can get a sense of at least how that organization.
So what this sounds like, and which is something something else, like, I think I'm not going to do that today, but maybe I will, is AI, which again is its whole other thing. So what we're seeing more and more, I mean, you can go to ChatGPT, which I did for a couple of things, and go, tell me about what's going on currently, if this topic, and ChatGPT will do all the work for you, and all the AIs will. So, and it will give you a summary. ChatGPT, at least where AI is now, and like, believe me, academia is sort of up in arms. I mean, ChatGPT is writing some really good papers lately, is what I can tell you about academia. But it's not that accurate. I mean, it can be accurate, but it really, ChatGPT and these AI programs want you to subscribe and pay like for the pro version, and they want you to be happy. And so they give you probably more or less what you want to know. There have been times when they've given a thing, and I'm like, can you give me the source for this? And it doesn't. It's like, oh, let me look again. It's very dodgy, ChatGPT will be like, let me look again and see if I can find that. Like, there is no, like, some of it's right and some of it's made up. Like, it's not as reliable as it seems. And so that's what I'm not sure, but what you're describing feels like they're letting AI do it, which would make me, it's both cool and worrisome, I guess is my answer. So then what I did, and again, I'm not going to go through the articles, and that would have been, again, a whole hour, but I basically said, let me look up the first article, and this is sort of like what we do as media studies people, but instead of doing like an N of 1, we would go and look at like 200 examples and then write about it. What I'm doing is not remotely scientific. I literally looked at one example for this, so just to let you know. But I said, how are each of these writing about the October 7th anniversary last year? Like, and I found the first article, and I looked, I sort of read through all 4 of these sources. And what I found, and this was sort of interesting, I'm just sort of telling you what I read, is that New York Times sort of did the sort of the best job of these 4 in terms of saying there are lots of ceremonies from synagogues and such, sort of laments, being sad about this and sort of commemorating what happened. And then there's protests from Palestinian groups. Basically, it gave both. Al Jazeera gave both, probably more emphasis on the Palestinian protests, but they still mentioned the fact that this many Jews had been killed and that there were these protests. They did both. It just, the emphasis was different. Times of Israel is sort of the opposite. Like, we're going to talk more about sort of the Jewish ceremonies, but there's also these protests. Fox News only mentioned the Jews. They didn't mention Palestinians whatsoever. That's what I found in looking at those 4, which was so that, just so they reported them differently, and that was sort of interesting. And maybe like people might say, oh, this one wasn't. Well, Al Jazeera did. I just thought that was interesting. And it's interesting to look at how they each cover it. And then there's always a question of like, is New York Times biased? So then I decided to do I did literally a Google search. But this I have going to open up. And oh no, that's my next. And so and I saved the search. So it was basically all these other sources talking about the New York Times. So I will do the work. I will be the AI, person and like sort of tell you what I found, which is that both, everything. There's places that are like, New York Times is so leftist because it's doing X and Y. And there's other sites, it's so conservative because they're not talking about this or that. I read through the entire page, and there's people complaining about the New York Times from both ends for different reasons. I'm like, oh, okay. I was like, that's a good sign. I guess it's a good sign. I guess maybe they are someone in the middle from this. So that's what I found. And that's very much a summary. And if people want this PowerPoint and you want to like read through it, please do so. Check my work. But that's what I was finding on this very quick thing, is that people are criticizing the New York Times for different reasons. And some call them one and some call them the other. It was interesting. All right. Okay. That's it. I'm going to social media now. That was it. So everyone knows Johann Gutenberg and who invented the printing press. I reminded myself that actually that's wrong. It was actually invented in Korea about 80 years earlier. And because we're sort of Western based, no one says that, but it's actually okay. I like to point that out to students. It actually was invented in Korea by someone else, but that's fine. And I think what it is I'm not sure how much they knew. I think different people were just like any invention, like it was time for it to happen. And so different people were inventing it in different places is really what happened. Korea was just first. So this is this really interesting theory that's fairly new called the Gutenberg parentheses, which I find it's like one of my favorite theories, if you will, which is that, so it talks about how before the Gutenberg press, things were performative. So you had people like making songs and people telling stories, and there was no media in any way. So everything had to be sort of word of mouth. So it was like that's how people sort of told. You could talk about religion sort of being in this, actually. What rabbis said was sort of how news was given.
Stained glass windows.
Perfect, exactly, that's exactly. Then you had this like period, especially in the 20th century, but anytime after Gutenberg, where suddenly you had this sort of one-way media. And, it's original, stable, it's like, this is the media, and this is what the media says. And then social media, in a sort of our utopian view of it 20 years ago, it's all different. We're back to this. This was just a blip in history, that we're back to storytelling and sharing with each other. And we really have like a way to sort of talk. And we're going to do things, and it's all these new terms like sampling and remixing. And, you can take images and you can make new versions of the images based on that artwork. So it's satire and parody as possible, and people do music sampling using old music, which is why you hear 70s songs and new songs. And it's actually, I think that stuff's sort of cool, and it's wonderful. I taught about that, and I still do for years. And there was sort of that notion that we were sort of in this like perfect place, and social media was this new wonderful thing. I thought that when I first started teaching. I'm not really there anymore. So, there's also a guy named Jürgen Habermas, another theorist from pretty recent, talk about the idea. And again, I have whole books on this guy. I'm going to give you the one-page version, but like the idea that the public sphere, that you have places where people can meet and talk about things. And it's been sort of criticism of his theories is that, you know, it's very sort of elitist, like people who like have jobs that allow them to not be so tired, that they can actually get together and meet are the ones who are actually talking. And it's not as simple as, you know, it seems. There's also the idea of the counter publics, which is that there's always like groups that are sort of like against sort of the hegemonic main, you know, like the mainstream ideas, and people are planning things. No, and as a colleague pointed out to me, you can't have one counter public. There's always many people who are objecting in different ways, hence the S, the plural. And I said, are we here doing that? Are we actually recreating a public sphere? And I hope we are in this whole debate. Yes, we are. So that's kind of the idea of it. And that was kind of the idea of social media, is that social media was going to create these spaces. What's this? So this is just like, I found this on the internet, but it's like, I did this years ago, back when you had technology that they didn't shut it down to be able to do it. This is like what an example Facebook network can be. And this is what this is, and everyone's would look differently, but it's the idea, and this is like the whole thing about social networks and people design these things, but it's the idea that, think about who you're connected to. How many people are on Facebook? Okay, many, okay. We're gonna talk about more like what I think you're on in a few minutes. So you have like the people you know from Temple Sinai, and you have the people from college, and you have the people who are in your hiking group. You know, like, and it's all kind of, and so that's what all these different areas would be. And then you're always surprised, like, there's one person who's a member of Temple Sinai who I also teach with, who also knows someone I went to college with because they worked in, and I'm like, how do you know that person? And you're always like, oh, well, and that's where you get these like random lines. You're like, how, and that's what's sort of fun about it, is like, you're like, how does this person know this person? So the idea with social media is that you know, can share these ideas, and suddenly all these different groups know about it, and they might share your ideas, and suddenly it goes spreads. And that's sort of the idea of social media being not one way, is that you have these sort of cool networks. This was like one of the more sane ones I could find. I was looking for examples of these pictures, and there's ones that are like, that was actually, at least there were 3 clear areas. But so the problem with social media, that they're sort of there. Again, you have this corporate control. People are always saying, and it's like they kind of try to hide it, where it's like, you know, I've been posting a lot about this political view, and now it's being taken down. That kind of thing. So the idea of social media, you know, is anyone on Blue Sky? Okay, so there's a theory that maybe Blue Sky isn't there yet, and it's sort of more, but who knows where it's going to be in the future. But that's one problem. There's an idea of like groups within, like a lot of times, like we're dividing ourselves up within social media. Like we're on this group or that group, you know, and we're not actually connecting to everyone. We're still kind of like, you know, coming into our own space. The algorithms are a huge thing. You've heard this term a lot. You probably know it's basically the idea that they're trying to make you happy. All these AI, everyone's just trying to make you happy. That's kind of the goal of this. So they want you to see what you think you want to see. So when you click on something a couple times, I mean, you know, this became very obvious to me 10 years ago when my father and I had completely opposite political views, but I liked buying him gifts for Father's Day. So I would buy him some books on Amazon. This is like 2009, 2010. And then they would be trying to sell me those books. I finally figured out how you can actually remove those. So I was like, I don't want any more of it. So, you know, so it's the idea that what you're seeing is really sort of based on what you say, what you click on, what you say you're going to see. And then the other tricky thing is that we don't have one big group because of demographics. I'm going to show you next. And actually, I added this in, and this actually, this I just found this the last second, and this sort of talks about how it keeps you hooked, where it's like they use machine learning to figure out what you want, and then they incentivize that you keep coming back. And I used to be really excited as a kid when I got every day. I loved the mail coming. You know what I mean? And none of it was for me. But like I was really sort of, I was like, oh, the mail's here. And I've never sort of gotten over that. Like I'm like 56, I'm still kind of like that. And that's sort of what social media is like all the time. Like every moment of the day. It's like, oh, there's another one, like constantly. And so that's how it keeps you kind of interested in looking at the ads. And that's really all it is. They're trying to get you to look at the ads. Yeah.
So with Facebook, you might have 1 million friends or whatever, however many
Right.
friends you have, and you post something. It doesn't, I'm thinking of corporate control. How is it that when you post something, it doesn't go to all your friends?
No.
And I don't know how they decide who.
They're figuring out, like, I think it might be that the friends that you're interacting with might see it, but the ones you don't, they might go, that actually, this is not like, I'm not a computer scientist, so it's not a complete, but it's like they'll say like, that other person doesn't care that much about that thing you wrote about, so we're not gonna show it to them. Yeah, so it's much more intricate than it's just like you get the post and everyone sees it. Now you can always, the way Facebook was originally is, you remember, I actually learned this from watching Social Dilemma, the movie, but like you actually had to like say, oh, I want to go see what my friends do, and you have to go to their page and read through their stuff, which they soon realized wasn't going to work, and they made it so you shared it out. So you can still do that. I mean, you can go to any of your friends' pages and read it, and you'll see everything. But in terms of how does it show up on your feed, it's not automatic. I'll say if anyone can give a better, please do. So this is, most US adults use YouTube and Facebook. So this is what most US adults are using right now. So the most popular social media is YouTube, then Facebook, then Instagram, and so forth. That's like the general, and it gets more interesting if you dive into the data more. And this is from Pew, like Pew's great. Like as I said, it's right in the middle, like Pew does a really good job with this stuff. And this is like maybe a year, older data is maybe a year or two old, but not too much. So then age is when it starts sort of falling apart a little bit, or being different. So Instagram, if you're over 65, 15% of people use Instagram. If you're 18 to 29, 78% of people use it. TikTok, 10 to 62%. The only ones like Facebook is weird because Facebook actually goes back on itself because really young people don't use Facebook. They just use it to talk to their grandparents. I mean, my students are telling me that. They're like, I have an account. They have an account, but they don't really use it for anything. They find it very kind of dated and they don't like it. LinkedIn kind of goes back because who's actually looking for a job. So some of them don't go linearly, but Twitter, I think Twitter is gone down for different political reasons. I mean, Twitter is not what it used to be, and so forth. So that's notable. And then this is where I find gets more relevant to what we're talking about today. Who regularly gets their news there, as opposed to the legacy media? So 48% of people using Facebook getting their news from Facebook, or how it's things people post. X, Twitter is 59%, TikTok 52%. So people are looking for their news more and more, and I find this terrifying, by the way. People get their news from what people share to them. But people are sharing to them, the people who are in their bubble, and which the algorithm has decided you want to see. So we've already talked about how the news sources are like there's bias in most of them, but like we accept that because we know and we look at a chart that this guy shows us. But if you're just seeing news on social media, then you're just seeing news. You know what it is. So I think so I actually am working on a research right now about like trying to figure out what college students actually look at, because I ran into a problem where I would bring up TV shows that I assumed everyone had watched, and they were like staring at me like, oh, we don't know what you're talking about. And that was not true until I'm like, well, you've seen this. Like, no. I discovered, and this is not quite what my research was, but I taught a film class and 5 kids out of 17 had never seen Star Wars. And I was like, what are can we report your parents? But this is out of 234 surveys I did, and these are all students in intro to media, so mostly freshmen, a few sophomores, at colleges across the country. I worked with 4 other faculty members. There's 5 of us, we did stuff across the country. And what we discovered is that, because some of them have double, like that's why the numbers don't add up to 234. But this is like, where do you get news? So 170 of the 234 said Instagram. 150 out of 234 said TikTok. New York Times was 41. Fox News was 31. Apple News, so in aggregate, was 26. Washington Post was 18. Snapchat was 78. So people, like especially younger people, are looking at social media. So I will give this, the student whose name I'm not going to say can forgive me, but she'll never know. We were talking a little bit about politics. I was literally teaching a course called Theater and Social Change. Like it was the whole class was politics. It was all of them doing plays about politics. And the student said, I really can't tell the difference between the two presidential candidates. This is 6 months ago or 8 months ago. Okay. And I'm thinking, so it wasn't even like it's not my business to tell a student who to vote for, but they didn't see the difference. And I'm like blaming all this. Well, that's not scientific, but I felt to some extent, or at least their sort of disconnection from news, if not this. Oh, and then there's one more thing. So this is also, TikTok users people who follow the news, they say, like, I'm following the news on TikTok. Who are they actually looking at? 14% are actually journalists who like post to TikTok, or like, BBC America posting on TikTok. 53% are non-journalists just talking about politics. And then 41% are non-journalists posting about news. So 86% are just like people giving their opinions. And then they say, that's the news I get. So that's when I said I'm less optimistic than I used to be about social media. This is kind of the key of why. All right. So what I have now is I actually have a couple of examples of this, of people from different angles talking about anti-Semitism. I'm finally coming back to that. That was on my theory. I thought that was important first. So let me open up a couple of these, and they're both like a minute long. No. Okay. Oh, this one isn't a video. This is just someone, if someone is an online presence and says they're Jewish, but their only relationship to Judaism is hating Israel, it's a massive red flag, and their opinions on Israel-Palestine mean absolutely jack with that. Israel is a massive part of Judaism, but it isn't even close to the only thing. A huge part this year has been the entire religion being defined by this one thing. I'm not saying these people aren't Jewish, they are DNA Jews, and that is totally fine. I actually found that to be a somewhat interesting, like, I'm not sort of criticizing this statement per se. I mean, it's rather intricate actually. And you have to kind of unpack it a bit. I read it like several times. But simply like, this is what people are calling news. That's sort of my point. Yeah.
So people are getting confused with statements versus opinions.
Yes, 100%. Because it's about the news.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's someone's opinion. And it's not like, I'm like, this is an interesting viewpoint. Like I'm not, but it's, and then the comments on the side are also going all over the place. And that's a whole nother thing, is that comments are just, I won't go into that right now, but they're also a thing. All right. So here is.
That's not my place, but can you explain how Israel is colonialism if Jews are indigenous to the land? Oh, absolutely I can. Not the indigenous part, that's not my place, but the colonialism part, oh yes I can. Colonialism is a global system of oppression that seeks to establish the dominance of Eurocentric knowledge hierarchies and ways of being in the world at the expense of other forms of existence on Earth. That can include settler colonialism, like Europeans in America, but it doesn't have to. As an Afro-Caribbean person, I am extremely careful to not tie my definition of colonialism to the question of indigeneity, because we were brought across the Atlantic. At the time, we were not indigenous to the Americas, so does that mean we didn't experience colonization? Of course not. The question of who's indigenous to the lands of Palestine and Israel is a debate that I'm aware of, but that I am absolutely not qualified to participate in. And my point isn't actually concerned with it, because my definition of colonialism is this. This is the map of a colonial power doing a colonialism. Regardless of who's indigenous to that land, one of the two powers, as described by this map, is colonizing the other. Note that I didn't use the disappearing Palestine map that I know is contested. This is a map from the government of Israel. Israel's own description of the way they administer Palestine fits the accepted definition of colonization. The fact that a global power has complete control over the bodies and resources of 2 million people of color that it doesn't recognize as its own and that it calls animals, that is colonialism in action right now.
I'm not going to get into politics per se. That's what I said I'm not going to do. I'm trying to show you what's out there and that people go, this is news. That's why I'm showing you this. I have one more.
Indigenous to Palestine. To claim otherwise.
There's like, I didn't even watch, I actually don't know what this guy says. Like, I think that they just go from one to the next.
So I'm an influencer, I'm online, I'm Gen Z, I was born in 2000, I went to Stanford, and what this war taught me is the public divide and divide of my generation with the rest. I thought that we were the generation that uplifts everyone. I thought that we were the generation that cared about the world. And really what I learned is that we're the generation of judgment. We care about judging people. We care about not listening to all sides. We believe in ideology more than realism. And anti-Semitism became the norm, it became cool. And so just realizing that being liberal or being Republican, any of these things means, you know, that you follow one way and you're dogmatic about it. I felt like I had to speak up and say something. My Stanford friends couldn't understand the politics of Israel. They couldn't understand that there's a lot of conflicting sides. They couldn't look at the story. They just decided that one is right and one is wrong, and therefore that's it. And so because of that, because people of my generation didn't seem to actually care, and all they wanted to do was what was public and what was normal and what TikTok told them to do, I felt like I needed to speak up for my people. I need to speak up for my Jewish identity, and I also need to speak up as a Gen Z person to talk about what's really happening here and stop anti-Semitism, especially amongst young people.
So the reason I showed these two is the sort of, we'll point out that these aren't like, from either side. In my view, they're not like kids who are just.
I saw the scene where the lead character is in her kitchen.
It's not like they're just sort of saying nonsense and swearing and being awful when you see some comments. Even that guy before, you can disagree with him vehemently, but he seemed like a pretty intelligent guy. You know, I mean, like they speak about, so there's all this stuff out there. And when I said earlier that social media has changed things, and really it's like people, it's easy to make these videos. You use your phone, you make these videos. People post them. That's kind of, there's a ton of them. I showed you two. I mean, that's kind of what the ecosystem is now of media. And so there's so much out there to watch, more than you can possibly imagine. And again, that's what people are viewing as news. So that last one, people probably like that. I agreed with a lot of them. I'm guessing a lot of people in this room. But again, it's all just sort of these thoughts. And that's what a lot of the sort of the conception of news has become. Which is why I went to go back to what I said before, when we have these different news sources and there's slightly different biases, you know, in my mind, I'm like, but they are journalists and they are news sources. You know, I mean, you have to sort of read into the bias and understand that, but it's way different than what we're seeing here. And I think that's significant, yeah.
As I watch and listen to you, it seems like a pretty bleak environment. I'm
going to try to make it better at the end.
I want to hear your hope for journalism.
Okay. I wrote this to myself because I think I'm going to skip some slides. So I actually hate when people do that. And normally I try to like make this right for an hour, and I just did. All my rules for myself went out the window. I'm like, who knows? Maybe, you know, so I'm gonna have to skip. So I was gonna talk about Superman, and I think I'm not gonna do that. Sometime I'll talk about Superman and semiotics, you know, talk to me, you know, in the hall. But that's a 10-minute conversation. And it's basically, I was gonna show, I'm gonna sit down and do this fairly briefly before we get to the end, if you will, is, you know, there's memes. You've heard about memes from the get-go of social media. There's the idea of people just, you know, use Photoshop or use whatever program is at hand, and they make stuff and they make images. Images, anti-Semitic images, have been around forever. You know, I mean, and what's interesting is, and terrible, is how they keep repeating. So this is a sort of a caricature you've seen. If we were going to do, and I'm not going to do this, but I mean, we could talk about, like, we could describe it and say, like, why are these, you know, bad images, you know, from our point of view. There is I'll just tell you, I found a really cool book I'm happy to share with people. Basically, anti-Semitic imagery. It's a whole report. And just email me or we can get this out. It's just interesting. And I'm not gonna, just tell you. But there's just been a lot of images, and what's sort of sad, and I can really kind of fly through these, is that we have images from, 100 years ago, and then images from right now, and they're using the same kind of symbols, like the octopus of Jews taking over the world, and Jews as animals. And so you have an old and a more recent one, they're still using the same stuff. Here, the idea of Jews as sort of like bankers and controlling the money hasn't gone away. Jews explain why they bring millions of Muslims and African immigrants to Europe, and people are posting this on Facebook. Terrible, every sentence in this is like horribly racist and awful. I'm not going to read it. But it's that sort of thing. This is blaming Jews for 9/11 over here on the right, much more recently. So I think I'm going through quickly just because it's somewhat nauseating, so I'm kind of not spending a lot of time. This is during COVID. These are all the memes that came out blaming Jews for COVID. So you could use old images, in the hazmat suit and such. These are more, so the one on the left, you can read it, it's sort of terrible. This is even using, office memes are pretty common. And, a Catholic meme that, plays around with the fact that, Jews killed Jesus. And you can know this is contemporary, it's an image from The Office. So stuff is still there. This is from Proud Boys. So they're using, current images as well. I found this one really, I don't know, I found this one fascinating. There's no question that it's like, I'll just say, so this one is like, you're like, in terms of yes, but Palestine didn't exist as a nation. The Netherlands wasn't a country until 1648, the USA since 1776, and Israel since 1949. Your point? I don't know. I find it still kind of confusing. But what I also found interesting about this one, and I spent more time on this one, is like, people love cats. So they turned a cat into a apparently old grumpy Jewish man. You know what I mean? Like it's weird. Like it's not using the typical symbols. And this one is, so I actually sit there like, okay, this one is weird. Like this one is different and weird. And media studies people are like, okay, so now what's happening? Kind of with this. Somehow it doesn't seem on the face as offensive as the others, but I'm not sure I'm right about that. You know what I mean? I'm sure if I thought about it long enough, it would be. So that's sort of some memes that I showed this. This is not anything to do with Jews or anti-Semitism, is that how maps can be so confusing, even maps that seem accurate. So we look at this. This is actually the presidential election map. But then you have to remember that like this is actually the population map of these different areas. Like the more red, the more populous the area is. So when you look at this with this, it doesn't seem quite as, however you reacted. So it's my point that maps seem like those are truth, and they're not. Everything is kind of. The guy on the first video actually referenced this, that this is often shown, and he even said it's not right. And in fact, I found a chart that said like what's actually more accurate, which it doesn't have the same sort of false alarming look, is the one below. So people are sometimes using maps and things that you think of as truth to better, and they're actually just wrong. You can make anything on Photoshop. You can make anything. And that's kind of, yeah. Yeah.
So aren't the numbers on there representatives?
They are.
So in the Constitution though, wasn't it created not based off of like, wasn't it like, it's not like based off of population, but like, it is?
It is and it isn't. Because, I mean, it is the number of senators we have, but then in the electoral college, it is, but it isn't. Yeah.
Each state has so many.
Right, yeah.
Help balance everything.
Yeah.
So how does this equate to the other map that I'm just.
It actually is agreeing. It's actually agreeing. It's actually because the lower numbers actually equate with the white areas. I think what I was, so it does. Actually, the two work very well. I was just pointing out the fact that people don't take the time to look at the numbers. And I think some people have a visceral reaction to like, that's a lot of red, if that's your political or not your political view. That was sort of my point. Yeah. And that was my point. I teach visual communication. So a lot of it's like, what do people see? Not necessarily to what people, but so you're absolutely right. But that's a more intricate, detailed look that you're supposed to do that many people don't do. Yeah, sorry, yeah. Yeah. Winner take all, you're saying, sir.
One more vote to win everything, and then you become a color.
Right.
And that's a distorted view of reality.
The whole electoral college is a whole nother question we're not going to get into anymore. But my point is that everything, I like my field. I'll just say media studies does everything. Media studies is economics, politics, literary theory, math, because it's like when it's done right now, like what I'm doing today, it's all this stuff. And I think what I like about it is the fact that media studies kind of encompasses a lot of things. And you can, my undergrad degrees are in film and psychology. So a lot of my research has been sort of using a psychology viewpoint, but I have a colleague he was an economist. So everything is from a media economics point of view. So it's just kind of interesting that way. All right. And then what I want to show these two is just like, these are, I mean, it's back to the settler colonialism talk, but they aren't like horrible, ugly memes like we were seeing. I mean, these are like infographics that people are with two, very nice looking, drawn young women. It's a different feel. So when I talk about the idea that people look at things like, oh, I got the news from this social media source, they're not saying they're getting it from some awful, clearly anti-Semitic meme. It's politics. And some of this, it's viewpoints, but it's not necessarily as researched as it may or may not be, or could be. So I was going to tell you that there are some memes that are pro-Jewish memes, I want to tell you. So I didn't actually know what this was until I worked on this presentation. So I guess the "Where are your Jews" memes are about the fact that all the other Arab countries haven't, I didn't actually know, I'm embarrassed to say I didn't really know about, there's almost no Jews there, and they don't want Jews there. So there's all these memes about, yeah. They were expelled, like they expelled these Jews. So there's actually lots of memes about the "Where are your Jews?" And I like the Batman one. So that's what I found if you look up "Where are your Jews" memes, there's you can see 50 of them. That's what I did. So this is sort of, again, I mean, it's a political cartoon really, but sort of about the protesters at colleges, I would suspect. I mean, again, whatever your political views are, it's just sort of so these, everything exists. Again, I would argue that these aren't very scientific either, but, they're all out there. This is, I thought it was, Jonathan, if you didn't know, the most interesting man in the world from the alcohol, he actually is Jonathan Goldsmith, a Jewish guy, if you didn't know that. So I thought, okay, so at least they're not taking him and doing something that's it'd be really awful in my opinion if they used him for anti-Semitic memes somehow. So I feel at least they're using him for this stuff. So I will be honest with you, I teach at a school in the Catholic tradition with kids who aren't very political. I do all this stuff. I don't use Israel and Gaza as my examples. I use other stuff like gun. I mean, I use other issues in the country there are 20 Jewish students at Fisher. So I kind of have chosen to not delve into this there, but I do the same theories. I do the same kind of stuff. Yeah. They wouldn't get it. It's too far away from what they know. And then they need to take a whole other class on Jewish history before they can get to if I did it this way. And I found out that this guy, and this is sort of ignoring the politics of it, it's called soy jack memes. My daughter told me that because she saw me working on this. Soy jack refers to the fact that this is an emaciated looking guy on the left. And if you eat tofu soy, you're emaciated. So I found out the origin of the meme name. My daughter came over and told me all that. I'm like, oh, that's okay. Now I learned something cool. And then this woman yelling at her cat meme. I don't even know what it's called. There's lots of these as well. So there you go. So the last thing, I'm doing pretty well. The last thing I want to show you is simply the one thing I would say, a couple of things that I like about social media is, regardless of where you are politically, you get to see things that the news isn't going to cover. and I think is valuable to know that people view this. So, I put it on my Facebook. I couldn't figure out how to save it. It's on my Facebook page, shared only to me. I don't really want to share this, but I couldn't figure out how to save it. So, so it's this guy.
Which is causing this conflict. The state of Israel does not represent all Jews, and certainly does not represent the Jewish religion. According to Jewish religion, all of this is criminal. All of this is forbidden. Basics of Jewish belief teaches that Jews are in a divinely decreed exile. We are even forbidden to create a sovereignty for ourselves. But especially when this is by killing, stealing, oppressing an entire people. This is not only criminal according to international law. This is a true violation of Judaism. And still, those people who choose not to follow Judaism misuse that very same religion to justify all those crimes forbidden in Judaism. The root cause is this criminal occupation, which is oppressing an entire people. We have to end this occupation in its entirety. If people will ask me my advice, the leaders of Israel should wake up tomorrow morning and step out of the Knesset and return the land back to indigenous population. I guarantee peace. It is not a difference of religion, which is causing this conflict.
No.
The state of Israel does not represent all Jews, and certainly does not represent.
Stop. Okay, stop. So Neterai Karta, I wrote it down because I didn't know, is a group, I'm reading this to you, is a group mostly consisting of Haredi Jews who oppose Zionism due to their religious belief that the Jewish exile must continue till the coming of the Messiah. So I knew about this group, and I at first I was like, I don't know who this guy is, but then I was like, oh, okay, got it. The reason I again showed this and I find it interesting is one thing I do find valuable at social media in this sense is I'm someone who I like seeing all these views. It does whatever you do with yourself. I mean, this is stuff that isn't covered on the news at all, but it was on. I've been doing a lot of digging for today, like a lot of like trying to find things, and a lot of things. I'm like, I don't want to. No. You know, so I curated some stuff, but I felt like, okay, the fact that there is this view, I'm glad I know that, and you can do what you want politically with that. But like, I think it's good for us to know that these different views amongst different Jews and how they portray that and how they speak about it. And social media is where you can see it, whereas you're not going to see it on the news. It's not a newsworthy event. It was actually at some pro-Palestinian protest. I believe in Philadelphia, I was thinking, from what I read, but I'm not positive, I think so. So these are sort of like a couple pages of political stuff, or concluding stuff, and one's political. As a media, I think I can say as a media professor, when you hear comments about don't trust journalists are the enemy, I'm getting worried. You know, I mean, as we should, yeah. And it's just because journalism has an important purpose in a democracy. And even if people go like, well, there's bias, there's bias there. Yeah, I know, but you know, we can deal with the bias. Part of being a critical thinker is knowing that there's this bias. You know, the answer is not to get rid of it. And also, I worry about fears of anti-Semitism being an excuse to get rid of media, which feels like it's happening. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar with the Project Esther, which has been put out by the same people that did Project 2025.
Oh, really? Okay.
And the goal, that is quite worrisome. The goal of it is to show in every way possible what you can do to shut down democracy. Yeah. Under the cover of calling it protecting against anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
That is what they are devoted to, and it's big. And I wonder how much it actually gets infused into social media. Because they are very clever about how they spread their tentacles.
Right, an interesting choice. Yeah, but I mean, and I think the other reason I showed the Haredi Jew just now is, at least from my point of view, there was nothing anti-Semitic about that. It was it's a different view of a smallish group of Jews, you know? I don't find, but I think it could be labeled that way. And I think that's where I want to use that sort of distinction, like Jews have different opinions. That's what we know that we have that. So, and then some concluding thoughts. Social media isn't, a lot of this I'm repeating. So social media isn't the utopian idea of a perfect public forum, but I still think it has value. I didn't really speak too much about anonymity. I think part of the problem is, especially in comments, that you don't know who people are. Sometimes they are just sort of like fake accounts people use, and that's sort of been well established. But more and more, we're seeing that that's not the issue. I mean, the 2 videos we watched of the young people, they weren't anonymous. So I don't think that, I mean, I think people are, I don't think it's a problem in one part of it, but I don't think, and it's good. I think people not being anonymous is good. I do think, at least in terms of news, I mean, we're still watching TV. Social media is displacing legacy media. I will tell you, so I teach this film class, and I required that students came to a film lab at night, because they're like, no, I can watch it on my own. And I'm like, you're gonna watch this Hitchcock film on your phone. Like, I know you're gonna do that, and I can't let that happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just in terms of like seeing what he's doing as a cinematographer, like it just makes me crazy. But that's sort of the way we're going. The openness of content allows all content, but it also allows us to get to content. So the last 2 things, this is my sort of hope. I think critical thinking is the key. I mean, that's sort of what people need to be able to get it. Media literacy is important. Media literacy as a media professor is a challenge from all sides. So like some politicians don't want to. In some cases, in some schools, they don't have media studies because it's not seen as being as important, or, you know, it's newer. And there's still schools that like don't value it. And then parents, and I say to parents, open houses, I have to spend 10 minutes convincing them that studying the media will get their kids jobs. You know, because if they say, okay, well, yeah, it will. There's lots of jobs out there. So, getting kids to even take electives sometimes is a challenge because it's sort of not looked as important. And my profession is sort of, my whole career has sort of been saying this stuff's important.
Yeah. So your number 5 is my greatest worry. Is that I don't know so much about younger people, but it seems like the ability to think critically, to use the scientific method, is sort of like disappearing. And so, like you say, you had one slide about, oh, this isn't a credible news source, this is just somebody's opinion. And yet that's sort of like taking over today. So
I agree, and I think to some extent I worry about sort of like, I mean, people sort of ask about like, you know, the importance of a liberal arts education and there's sort of being de-emphasized, and I'm like, it's because they can think about these things.
Yeah,
that's why, whatever it is. But I think people who get through it probably are in better shape. But if less people sort of go that route, there's lots of reasons why it makes sense for lots of students. But I also think they lose out on something. Yeah.
Jeremy, I hope you'll be a regular contributor to the whole Bagel.
I was going to say that does end my stuff. So I'm happy that we have a few minutes. I'm happy to like talk about stuff some more. You had some. Oh, I'll go back.
Because I think what wasn't mentioned in your talk, because you couldn't talk about everything. When China and Russia make a concerted campaign using AI, using the wealth of their technology to get a certain opinion through our social
Absolutely.
media.
Yeah. It's very scary. And there's been a lot of, that's not like, it's not a hypothetical. I mean, there's been lots of like very clear evidence and written by there was a book by a scholar at UPenn who, 400-page book explaining how this has all happened. So absolutely. Absolutely is worrisome. Absolutely. Yeah.
So back in the beginning slides, you were talking about the media and the triangle.
Yeah.
Who decided what is a credible source? Like, who created the algorithm that says this is credibility, this is not?
That's a good question. I don't know. I need to probably look more into the exact methodology. I can tell you that the ad fonte media, again, everything's a business, but it's someone who said, we can make money doing this accurately and selling it to universities. So like, even though I could show that, in order to like get interactive ones, you have to like subscribe. So that's their business. So the fact that they're not connected to anything else, it really is like their whole business is based on them doing things in a way that are reliable. Like, and it's a bunch of statisticians who figured out, so I don't have a complete answer, I'm sorry that I don't, but it feels, but it's critical thinking, but the company that does it seems to has greater credibility, like a lot of colleges are like, yep, they've looked at it and gone, you know, what they're doing. And again, it varies, even they say, 6 months from now, they have to shift things because the media themselves are shifting around. New leaders, and then they shift to appease them, and so it's constantly changing. Yeah.
Just one thing that you haven't mentioned, is the fear now for people of my age.
Yeah.
I've been on Facebook forever, mostly because my students, I also was a college professor.
Okay.
Now I see not just my students, but their children.
Yeah.
And where they're going to college, and my friends' grandchildren. Those were the things that interested me initially. But then politics definitely became a part of my being on social media. I have 2 sons who are involved in political positions in various industries. I will not post anything because I see people being arrested for posting an opinion.
Yes. I don't have a lot to say on it because I'm also in a sort of shock that this is happening still, but it does seem to be starting. And there are cases of that. And what people do with their social media is certainly an individual choice at this point. And I'm agreeing with you. And really, it's like kind of thing where it's like, I'm not sure I don't even know personally what I'm doing with that yet. But yeah, it's quite disturbing. One thing I thought you were going to go, and it wasn't direction. One thing that actually inspired me to do this, and it ended up not fitting this, but I think it's a really interesting is there's all these Facebook groups about like parents of college students against anti-Semitism. My son, I'll say, my son just deposited RIT, and there's like an RIT against anti-Semitism. And these pages are interesting and complex, and they're not as straightforward as anti-Semitism is bad. And I don't want to like actually get into it too much because it's almost like I need to think about my own feelings about it. But they're really interesting Facebook pages in terms of how they deal with the politics of it. And again, it's like it's locked down. Like you have to like, not that they could check, but it's like, you don't join unless your kid is enrolled already, not if they're interested. And you could get around it. But it's very interesting how it's sort of locked down. And then I don't know. It's an interesting. It asks for its own study, which I have not done. So I'll leave it there. Anything else? Yeah. Please.
So one of my biggest worries is that it seems to me that younger people don't read anymore. And I'm wondering, in your experience in teaching over the years, do you see your students as getting like more intellectual or able to think critically, or the other way, or not at all?
I will answer this, and other professors can please sort of add. I have found, I think the average amount of reading has gone down. I used to think, I'm just getting old and grumpy. Oh no, but I actually think in the last 5 years, there's been a shift. I will say, so I just taught this film analysis class, which I mentioned already, and it's a 300 level course for non-majors. It's like the capstones for film theory and stuff. And there was a fair amount of reading, not as much as I used to. Like I've kind of come to my senses. I'm like, I'm not going to read 3 articles, there's not. There was like a subsection of kids. There was probably, out of 18 kids in the class, there was probably like 5 or 6 who read every single word that I could tell. No matter what I gave them, I could give them super theoretical articles about some of them, and they read everything. And then there would be some that were like, I think they may have opened it and like spent 5 minutes. And then there were like 5, like they read nothing in this class. They read nothing. I used to give reading quizzes until kids realized that reading quizzes tend to not be worth much, at least the way I did it. And they're like, I don't mind getting a 93 average instead of a 98. I'll just not do the reading. It almost gave them a permission to I'll take the 0. And they just didn't do it. And that happened to me a few years ago. I'm like, oh, okay. And so my answer is, I do think it's gone down, but I don't think it's like every student doesn't read. I don't think it's that, fortunately, that simple. I will say the amount who read, I think it's decreasing. I think that's a sign. Oh, but more question. One more, yeah.
The other piece that I heard, and it must be true, is that
young people don't go in Brown's bookstores. They don't have that kind of curiosity because everything is sort of fed to them. Amazon says,
Yeah.
then you should read this one, right?
Again, and this is very anecdotal, and it's a little non-scientific anecdote. I taught, despite what I said before, I did teach media economics. I do teach media economics as well because no one else wanted to, and I like that stuff. And so I teach myself new stuff. I took them on a field trip to Barnes and Noble and Book Culture so that we could analyze like how they presented things. And they were like, this is pretty cool. So maybe they just need someone to take them. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Really, thank you so much. This is really something I'm going to listen to, learning from you. My one comment, and other than thanking you, and I totally agree that we can do some our algorithm is now going to send us to others. It's like we want more of that, right? On Amazon. So just to say that in addition to all of this, social media, like any other thing, only has as much power as we give it to. And one of my radical practices and teaching is just don't be on it.
Right.
And I would, and not, I'm the person who left Facebook on October 17th of 2023 and only popped up recently to have 2 posts, saw that I got like 150 likes and okay, I told my story in the way that I wanted to, but it's like a dangerous thing, right? So I try to kind of like not be on it. I'm not saying that everybody has to do the same, but for sure balance it, because what is truth and what is reality? And as we are been learning from you, this is like we say in Kabbalah, golem kama mitzro, the golem, the thing that we have created has become stronger than its creator. I think more than anything, what we've been learning from you, that technology is messing up with our brains in a way that is very difficult to handle. So to balance that, I would say this is why spirituality, now I'm selling my business. Okay. Yeah, obviously we need social media for you to have a job teaching it. I need spirituality for me to have a job as a rabbi. So my antithesis, it's all the big powers behind it, and the economic interest. So my economic interest would be, going outside to the wilderness and looking at the trees and breathing. There's no less truth than CNN or Times or, coming to temple, worshiping, meditating. There's no less truth than the New York Times or something that China put in our brains through an algorithm. All right, so to balance all of this, and of course, we're political people, we need to have opinions, we need to get our input from somewhere, not that radical. And I want you to keep your job so you can pay dues to the temple. But so my less radical teaching would be yes, and balance it with just shutting off the whole thing, and realizing what truth is, in a much simpler way. Having said that, a fascinating lecture, this in my subjective opinion, and learning so much in an hour and a half, and then some. Really wonderful, a lot of food for thought. I'm so proud of our intellectual and cultural salon for the Bagel that brings such amazing voices that we have within our community. So we'll talk a little about that next week as we wrap up. But if you yourself have a lecture that you never gave, and I need to apologize, maybe some of you have already offered, then please send that information to the office. I want to do, if you know someone who should give a lecture who's not you, we're actually collecting these voices. We can't always have everyone, but if you won't be this semester, you'll be next semester, next year, nothing to worry about. So thank you, Jeremy. Everyone have a great afternoon, and please remember that 11 o'clock there's another class starting here, so do not loiter after that. Take care.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Oh, good. And I figured out how to Apple. I'm. This is exciting to me.
So you don't actually.
I didn't even. Yeah, I just screen mirrored it through Bluetooth. Yeah, it only works with Macs, but yeah. Okay, I'm gonna. Yeah. No, I didn't. No. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Only by the people who were promulgating it everywhere, making they're making it happen.
Right.
And the same thing, you will see how it's permeating.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
I'd
nice.
love to have a conversation with you.
Sure, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
At some point, I don't remember figuring it out.
Yeah.
Right, I was thinking, we shouldn't confuse, this was in the founding, we shouldn't confuse reliability.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
A lot of outlets, they need a market.
I can't watch.
And they don't have to be reliable. And
Yeah.
as I find it saying, stupidity, you know, there are a lot of people who buy into
Right. No,
whatever they want to.
exactly. And what I said, I can't watch like the main network, like ABC, CBS, NBC News at night. It's so nothing. Like it's so neutral and it's so not, you know, like engaging in sort of any kind of intellectual way. And I actually find it, I personally don't even watch this.
Well,
I should.
disagree a little bit. You can never be neutral because you can't present everything.